Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Business of Yoga. I am super excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Lisa Princic. Lisa is a trained business strategist, membership expert, and the host of the Scaling Deep podcast. She supports her clients with membership growth, and she's here on the show to talk all about memberships. This is a topic that I feel super excited and also super passionate about sharing with yoga teachers and business owners. So she shares what a membership is, how to know if it's right for your business, how to market your membership when you have a small audience, overcoming negative self-talk, business lessons she's learned through her career, and so much more. So we are diving deep into all things memberships. So if you've been thinking, hey, a membership seems like an interesting option for me and my business, this will be an awesome episode for you to tune into. Before we get into it, I just want to give a little shout out to the sponsor for today's episode of the show, Offering Tree. Thank you so much to Offering Tree for supporting the podcast. And please make sure you go check them out. They are your one-stop shop for all things yoga business. And if you do feel like offering a membership is something great for your business, Offering Tree can do that. They have amazing membership functionality. So I'll be sharing more with you about Offering Tree later on in this episode, so stay tuned for that. But if you want to check them out, offeringtree.com/MBOM will get you an awesome little discount. All right, now on to the episode. Here's Lisa. Welcome to the show today, Lisa. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
Yeah, it's so great to connect with you.
Yeah, and can you share with myself and listeners where you're joining us from today?
I'm in Squamish, BC. So, you know, Vancouver. I'm just north of Vancouver between Whistler and Vancouver in a little small, rapidly growing town that's very outdoorsy, where I spend my time mountain biking and cross-country skiing and doing all those fun things.
Yeah. I've been to Squamish a couple of times, and Squamish is a beautiful part of the world. I feel like I know so many people who are like, oh, I'm moving from Vancouver to Squamish, or like Lower Mainland to Squamish. And I'm like, oh, many people
we're not
moving
a
there
anymore.
Yeah. Not quite a hidden gem anymore.
No, it's gotten pretty busy, but you know, it's still relatively small. And I just remind myself of that. Like, I appreciate the fact that it's not a metropolis, and it probably never could be. So despite the fact that it's changed a lot, it's still like I can still mountain bike from my doorstep and go in any direction and, you know, do all kinds of things that I would have to drive pretty far to do in a different city.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm stoked to dive in with you today. I love talking about memberships. I think memberships are such an amazing opportunity for yoga teachers and wellness professionals and studio owners. But let's back up a little bit. I want to hear a little bit about you, what you do, and your background.
Yeah, well, so my background, like when I actually had a job a long time ago, when I decided not to be a snowboarding bum, I got work in corporate social responsibility and sustainability. So I was always really focused on like doing meaningful work. And that really brought me to getting to know a lot of social enterprises and small businesses that were mission based, and they're so part of their purpose was to do something good, like, you know, help marginalized people, employ them, or just like make sure that where they were sourcing their product was ethical and environmentally sound. So that was my world, and I loved it, except for the fact that I was craving a lot of freedom, and I really needed to travel more, because I do love travel. Like, it's probably the thing that lights me up the most and kind of takes me out of my day to day and just brings me joy more than other things. So I had, like, on a whim, decided to quit my job and go take life coaching, which was a long time ago, like before anyone really knew what that was. That was in 2008. And that just kind of started the journey of bringing back that passion for small business with like having coaching skills, and then I sort of moved my way towards business coaching, and then like becoming more of a strategist, so someone who just really looks at the bigger picture and the model and the offers and the pricing and all those details. And then I niched in the last few years down to memberships, and that was, a pretty intentional shift because of wanting to be more niched, to be honest, and have a more, I guess, control and influence over how I could grow, versus if you're a generalist, it feels a little bit more challenging to be focused and intentional because it's hard to differentiate. So I've been focused on membership businesses, which are really just a complex offer. So not a lot different than I was doing beforehand, except for it just has a little bit more of a container around it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool to hear. And I'm a big fan of niching down. And it's so funny because once you start doing niching work, you're like, realize how much you can actually niche down. Like, for example, I feel like running a podcast and a business, teaching yoga teachers the business of yoga is like pretty niche. Like when I tell people just in my day-to-day life that, they're like, wow, that's like a very specific market. But then as I work in that, it's like, well, there's yoga teachers at so many different levels and so many different kind of philosophies around, what they want to do. And to me, I'm like, oh, I feel like I need to get really clear on like, exactly who in this niche I'm actually like talking to. So it is funny as like, as you start doing niching work, you end up niching even more.
Yeah. And well, you see the benefit of it. So it's like, I wanted to for so long, like I knew that I had to do it. And I really encourage my clients to go as narrow as they could go, like, authentically. Because if we try to niche into something that we either don't like or that is just so kind of like not really real, we don't necessarily get more traction or benefit from it. But I really had to kind of think about it and be mindful of trying to find that like plan and that space, because I didn't want to put myself into something that I didn't enjoy. So I waited, and it took a long time, but now I see the benefits of it, because now it's like I get asked to speak on things, and I get pulled out of like, who knows how they found me. And people can Google like people lately have been saying, oh, I found you on Google by searching like information on membership. So, it's made my life easy in terms of not worrying about people finding me, like having to get found. I know there's going to be a natural flow that I don't have to like force or like really push myself out there. Even things like this podcast, you're like, oh, I'm really curious and I'm really interested to talk more about memberships. But had I just been like, hey, I like talking about business, let's talk about some marketing thing, you might not have kind of gotten your head around like what I could offer, and kind of had your mind start wandering. So it does really make that part easier, and you see the benefits of it. And I think that's where like, then we want to keep going and going and going, because we become super hyper relevant to one small group of people. We will get traction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. I think too, I do get lots of like pitches where people are like, oh, I want to like talk about business. And I'm like, but what do you want to talk about in business? Because business is like so general, right? It's like, there's a million things you can talk about with that, which is proven by the fact that I've done like 300 episodes of this show and still going.
Well, and it's like, there's efficiency too. And I think that's part of like, as a person who thinks strategically, it's like, I'm always thinking about like, what is the way to do things sort of the easiest, or the most like has the most flow, and having flow is like sending out a podcast pitch and then having a really strong sense that someone's either going to be really interested or really like, oh, I did that, or I'm not interested at all. And then you don't feel like you have to kind of like be noisy, because you're going to be a really easy yes or no for people, which is like way more in flow than like just like feeling like you have to be like pushy. So I feel like that is really important to me too, is having sort of that natural fit in the world. And I've always craved that in my business. It's like the product that people create that everyone wants, right? You want to have that. You don't want to be the one that's like trying to force something on people who are not ready for it or not interested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree. And so, yeah, let's dive into a little bit more about memberships. Like I said before, I feel like memberships are a really amazing opportunity for yoga teachers right now. But maybe let's start with, for somebody who's totally new to this concept, what is a membership, or what can a membership look like?
Yeah. So if we look at it broadly, like in the world, A membership is a subscription service. So we actually have a lot of subscriptions these days, and the world is kind of going that way. Like there's monthly fees for lots of things. And I think when the very sort of like big picture viewpoint, it's saying you're going to pay for access. So instead of getting something that you own and that you have forever and it's like a one-time payment, I mean, there are varying structures, but you basically are saying like, I'm going to use this info, I'm going to use this tool, I'm going to use something, and I'm going to pay for it monthly. And that is also saying that when you stop paying for it, you lose access. So it's not like you have a download of Spotify music or something, right? Like you give up your downloads. So yeah, that's really just in a general sense what a subscription is. Now, a membership in terms of business is usually very similar. You're either getting access to some kind of content or some kind of live interaction or support that you're paying for access to, that if you were to stop, you could pay a year. Some subscriptions or memberships are an annual fee, but the moment you don't pay, you don't have that access anymore. And sometimes that's just even in the form of a community. There's a lot of memberships out there that have just like a place, like a space for people to engage and interact, and that is paid for, and they'll pay a small fee for that, and sometimes that's all they get. So there's just a variety of them out there, but basically it's just to get something that you have as a business owner, something something that you're sharing, and that's how you're selling it.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really great description of it. And it is so interesting to just see the way the world's going. I feel like Netflix kind of like kicked it off in terms of, these like monthly memberships for access to entertainment. And now it's like, gosh, I don't even know how many of those memberships we have.
I think like bigger institutions that, I mean, when I do a little bit of research, I realize that there's some really big players that are all thinking and talking about this, like banking, like you name it. It's become I think the way to create more sustainability for companies, because they know that and I think in this sense, it's easier for us because we don't have to buy these like big lump sum investments on things, and we can just pay as we go, which always is a little bit easier from a cash flow perspective. So yeah, it's kind of a trend, I think. And I don't think it's going to go away at all.
Yeah, it is very interesting to see how it's shifted. And one thing, with the yoga industry that I've found quite interesting over the last couple of years was just seeing how I felt like memberships were more so with like yoga studios, or there were a couple of big kind of online platforms that housed, a lot of the bigger name teachers. And so I think those were kind of your main options for memberships, I guess like 2-3 years ago. And with the shift with the pandemic and everyone, starting to practice yoga online and yoga teachers offering their services online, I feel like it kind of opened this door for independent yoga teachers with a decent following to start their own memberships. And especially with so many yoga studios, unfortunately, closing their doors, it's like the opportunity was even greater for that. And so obviously, everything that's happened with the pandemic has been horrible in so many ways. It's interesting to see as we're kind of coming out of it, these shifts that have happened in industries that have kind of, opened doors for people. And I really do feel like these independent yoga teachers who were really relying on studio income or private clients, now they have this opportunity to like create their own, small business without having to have the brick and mortar of the studio, if that makes sense.
Which is really expensive, right? Like that's challenging.
100%. And it's like, I mean, space is limited, right? Like,
yeah.
Then you've got a rent payment, you've got that physical overhead to pay every month. And that can be, very challenging financially, and also a deterrent for a lot of people. Like, I think that if you polled a lot of yoga teachers who perhaps have their own independent memberships right now, they would be like, I don't want to be a studio owner. Like, that's not something I want to do. But they're able to create their own kind of independent business from the yoga studio and make, a good monthly revenue.
Yeah, like so an old way of doing a membership for a yoga studio would be similar to a gym membership, right? Like people just say, okay, I'm going to go quite frequently and it's cheaper to get a monthly pass, or if I invest in a monthly pass, I'll go more often, some kind of incentive. And that was really still about access though, and showing up live. Whereas now, a yoga studio owner or teacher or anyone can actually create something that has more of a combination of things. So you could have classes, and then you could also have content, you could have trainings, you could have like circles, you could do all kinds of things related to what the client, the student is interested in, and kind of facilitates that journey. So I think what it's done for people who are really innovative and take initiative, those teachers, they've probably created a bigger like platform or movement or something around it that can offer more, because as they don't have to be as busy by showing up in person or bogged down with admin, they can be creative and offer different things like, hey, I found this guest speaker, do you want to hear them? Or do more like audio teachings or something like that are also not just about the practice, like, but like kind of related. So I think there's just opportunity for innovation, and there's probably a lot of people who took that and ran with it.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I completely agree. And so now that we've kind of talked about, what a membership is and just some kind of general thoughts around it, maybe we can dive into like, how do you know if starting a membership is right for you? Because obviously there's like some considerations that you want to make before you just go ahead and, pay for software, record a bunch of videos. Like if somebody's listening and they're like, yeah, I think that this sounds really cool. I'd love to make like some monthly revenue in my business. I'd love to build my own audience. How do you know if this is like the right opportunity for you?
Well, yeah. So that is, there's so many, there's so many factors here, but I'll paint some scenarios. So for example, if you're fairly new to business and you don't know like a lot about it, it is a little bit of a challenging model, because it's got like you're selling one to many, right? So you can't just like be sending out, a link every month to your PayPal to like 20 people. I mean, you can start that way, but you're going to need some systems in place to not only just have like host the content as you're mentioning, but like make sure you're tracking the payments. Like it's a bit of a more complex system behind it. You can start small, you can start really like easy, but you just have to consider like what your interest is in that kind of a business, right? Like running something online, being the business owner versus just the teacher, that is going to have a shift in up leveling versus just seeing like 5 private clients a month who you have a relationship with and you just send them an invoice or something. So there's those considerations. But in terms of like this technology and the software, like I don't really want people to get caught up in that, because it's actually not that important. It's most people do the overkill. Like you just need a place for people to hang out if that's what you offer, or a place to host a few videos, that you can find private YouTube channels or something like that. Like it really can be low cost, not super sophisticated. I think when I first launched the membership that I have now, I think I just did Zoom trainings, and then I kept everything on Google Drive. Like that's what I decided to do first, because I didn't want to make any other decision at that point. And it was like a small group of people. So you can keep that low key. And then you also want to consider like really what are your goals? Like how ambitious are you? Like, do you want to have like a lot of people, build a big audience? Do you already have a big audience? And that's one of the things we can think about as well, is if we don't have a huge audience and we don't really have an interest in doing that, we have to charge enough that it makes sense to keep it going. Because it's one thing to have 5 people paying $20 a month versus 1,000 people paying $20 a month. That's quite a big difference. So if you have a really small group, you can totally still do a membership that offers a higher level of service and make similar amounts to having a higher volume. So I'm just saying you don't have to have a membership doesn't always mean low cost. There are memberships that are $500 a month. There are memberships that are $2,000 a month, and they still serve quite a few people, but they didn't necessarily start out that way. And the pricing was more sustainable for the audience they had. So those are the considerations. And then I have one last thing to mention, is that if you aren't charging that much and you have a small group, you have to just be careful to not give away too much. Like you can't be, I know, answering every private question for a price point that isn't like a private client, right? So you have to have some boundaries or you'll just want to give away everything to help people and you'll end up doing it for very little money and not have a lot of time. So you've got to kind of get really clear on like what do people get for this amount? Like what seems fair? And again, especially if you are small to start, some people are going to get a lot more attention if you have like a group call or an intimate group. They'll get to know you, you'll get to know them as a teacher and you'll have like they'll get more benefit from it. So you don't need to just be say doing it every week. Yeah. So just limiting the balance there between the kind of profit and the like earnings and the amount that you're giving.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think those are all really good considerations. And I think it's really interesting to think about the pricing. Maybe we can dive into that a little bit more later on. But I remember just kind of early days of the pandemic, I was working pretty closely with a yoga studio that's based in Canmore. And, you know, we'd had a monthly membership package or pricing for like unlimited classes for years. That was an offering. But then with everything shifting, it was like, okay, well, there's a lot of people who just want to practice with recorded classes and we're recording all the classes, we're putting them online anyways. These people get them as kind of a little bonus since they can't come in the studio, but like, how do we price this fairly so that like, other people who just want this are able to get access to it? And looking at what was happening kind of in the market, it was just like, some people were charging $5 a month for their monthly memberships. And then some of those bigger platforms like, Glow, for example, was charging around $20 a month. And then there's other ones charging, $100 a month. And so I just remember us being like, where do we fit in this market? Like, how much value are we adding to people and what are our clients going to be willing to pay? Because if we're charging $100, are they going to just go to another platform? Like it can definitely be a little bit tough sort of navigating this. So maybe now is a good time to kind of dive into that. Like, how do you kind of figure out what you're offering your clients, what they're willing to pay, and, how to figure out the pricing based on those things?
Okay. Well, the not so fun answer is that you have to test everything, right? And it is true that we are in a world of services that is value-based pricing. So it's like people will pay for what they perceive the benefit to be. And that's why, like, so I had this client a while ago who was in a membership that was $2,000 a month. And I said, oh, wow, there must be just a really small group. She goes, no, there's 900 people in that membership. I was like, really? She's like, I get so much out of it. It totally transforms like everything I do in my business. I'm like, really? And the value isn't the amount of time or the like, she doesn't get like a private, coaching with that or anything. She just gets something that adds, an ability for her to do something way better. And that is worth it to her. So you can see how like someone else would be like, wow, like I don't feel like I have the magic to charge that amount for something that is so like everyone is accessing it, it's not like private or personalized or anything like that. But I think you can see that it just really comes down to like, what do we perceive we're getting? And so that's where I think we need to ensure that we're not just saying, like, if we want to price a little bit more, you have to really kind of describe the outcome. Just be like, okay, so if you come to this, or if you buy this subscription, here's what you get and here's what it's going to do for you. And so what you're doing is instead of just saying like, I'm selling you like a widget, right? Which they can sure go off and get another widget somewhere else. And that's like price based. That's what airlines do, right? If you don't have, if the seat is too expensive on one airline, you're going to go to another one. And if you're doing it based on like, no, like this is premium, like this is, here's, you're going to get this, like you're going to get a better outcome. You're going to be more of who you want to be and do more of what you want to do because you're with us and we are differentiated that way. And for a lot of people, that's worth it, right? Like how often do you go into a store or buy anything where you're like, there's generic brand and then there's this brand and this other brand. comes with some feeling that feels better and makes us feel more capable than the other one. And it inspires us. So I think that's where we have to think about how we're positioning what we have. Like if you want to be the lowest priced place in town, great. But the problem is you're probably going to be competing with the big ones that have such a mass market and have such ability to advertise and be already a household name. You're going to not be able to compete on price. So I think that's why I would consider offering something a little extra or something a little more special and really being careful in how you describe it and what you're committed to seeing through for people, so that you can convey that and that they will be more excited about what you have to offer.
All right, friends, we're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk a little bit about Offering Tree. You guys have heard me talk about Offering Tree so much on the show, and that's because I truly love their business. And one of the things that I really love about Offering Tree for yoga teachers is that you can scale your business. You can create engaging digital content, video libraries, courses, challenges, and coaching programs that can meet your clients and students anywhere at any time. You can also plug seamlessly into your membership and packages to offer added value to your loyal clients. At any point, you can go from just offering classes to also offering courses, coaching, one-on-one privates, memberships, and so much more. And all of that is easy to do in one place. You don't have to look for other software, you don't have to pay other pricing plans, and so much more. Plus, with templates and integrated website features, it's super easy to get everything you need for all of this stuff up and running and launched before you know it. So now when you have an idea for a new program or a new workshop or something like starting a membership, you can just make it happen with their services. So if this sounds interesting to you, head on over to offeringtree.com/MBOM. You can do a free trial here or get a discount for listening to the show. Once again, offeringtree.com/MBOM. All right, now back to the episode. I think I guess what it comes down to is that, we're not going to be able to set an exact price for somebody who's listening, right? It's like there needs to be a little bit of research and trial and error and kind of figuring out what you're offering somebody, what the value is, what the perceived value is, and understanding who your client is also, I think, is going to be huge. So
yeah, totally. So I think it's all that. I mean, I really do think you do want to look around, but again, there's no reason why you have to be price competitive if you're really thinking through what the offer is, because it's a little bit different than just an experience of showing up in person, right? Like when we show up in person, we get a feel for something and it feels good. And so you've got to be able to convey the same thing. So yeah, so I would say that you gotta price it sustainably. You've got to be able to earn more than you're spending on developing it and including your time. And because there is time to put these things together and put them up online. But then I would also consider like, how can you charge more? And I think that's really important for memberships, because if you are in a small community and you're advertising in the small community and you're not planning to attract more global people, you're going to have a limit to volume and how many people will join. And that if that's the case, then if it's going to be too little, it's not going to be like, you might want to close it down if you're not charging enough. So it kind of just has to be a certain price point in order to make it worth it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense because like you said, I mean, if you're charging, say, let's use $10 a month because that's like a nice round number and you've got, 20 people in there, that's like $200 a month. Is my math right there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's like I'm having a moment of doubting myself.
And so, okay, so that could be a loss leader, like meaning that if you have those 20 people could also be like more tethered to the studio and also be coming in more often. Sure, if that actually brings to the profit because you're serving people in a different way. But if it's actually something you're relying on for income, that's not going to go very far. So I think, and for the effort too. So I think you have to be prepared to offer. And again, like how many people want to do something with like buy from a giant brand that's super generic, and then how many people would be like, hey, I'd rather buy from the person who I know and trust already. So then you can feel a little bit more confident charging a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is having those conversations with that yoga studio that I was mentioning, that's one of the things that we kind of identified as one of our main strengths is like one of the reasons that people will be willing to pay. I think we landed at like $39 a month or $40 a month or something with the membership. I think it was around there between 40 and 50. And for just online recorded videos, big library of that type of thing. And we really had to go back and forth as like, why would somebody choose this over like Glow Yoga, which is like $20 a month? So they can save half the cost pretty well. And we kind of came down to like, these people want to support this business and they're interested in these teachers. Like these are their yoga teachers, right? Like that's what we have as the competitive advantage. It's not, the big film crews or like the celebrity yoga teachers. It's not any of that. It's the teachers that they know and love. And it really came to like, if we're trying to sell this platform for $20 a month, we're not Glow Yoga. Like we're not going to have, thousands and thousands of members. And so is it even worth it if we only have, 20 people joining? And yeah, that's kind of what we came down to is like, it needs to be a higher price point.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, it sounds like you made a really good decision because it's true. Like there are so many things that are in this world that are actually, you get the same thing that are priced differently, but we buy from what we want. And for someone who has a relationship with, it's like going, it's like going to one restaurant versus another. Like if you have, like, if you know the owner or something, like if you had a strong memory somewhere, like, would you pay an extra $20 a month on a restaurant you like better? Yes. Like most people aren't that price conscious. Like they are a little bit mindful, but they're not necessarily looking for the cheapest thing. They're like, I want to be able to look at the people and go, I know them and they're awesome and they know who I am. Like not everyone's looking for that generic experience. Like I wouldn't want to sort through all that. I would definitely want to join anything that was curated more for me than like having to sort through and find out who's the right person for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And so I'm sure there's people listening who are like, my business is pretty small. Like even the idea of getting 20 people in my membership feels like, maybe like a stretch goal of a big launch, like pretty daunting. I'm curious your thoughts around memberships. If you are somebody who has maybe a smaller audience, a smaller list that you're selling to, should they still pursue a membership? And if so, how?
Well, I mean, the question really comes down to what is the alternative? Because if you're considering some kind of way of selling something in an online format, you're going to have your choices. Like this, there's courses, there's more intensive programs, there's retreats. Like you're looking at the options of like, if you do need to bring in some revenue, like you've got to kind of decide what is right for you. And I think that they're all going to be challenging if you have a small audience to some degree. Like it's going to be slow start sometimes. So I think that it's not necessarily that. I think that's why I say, like, if you are excited about a membership because you feel like you're growing a community of people, you feel like your clients are going to be way more excited to be like, and they'll stay. If you have a really strong following, even though it's tiny, they'll stay, for a year or two or more. And then that's also potentially even more value, especially because it's really nice to teach when you like teaching. Like I'd rather be in relationship with people and actually teach them and see their wins than just sell a million courses. And that's my personal preference because I don't get a lot of fulfillment not seeing how people are doing. So having a membership means that you just get to kind of continue that and watch people grow and evolve. So it's very relationship oriented. So I'd say that, you're really, what are your choices? Like if you can very much take your relationships and grow them longer term, and you can still do it slowly. So it just depends on how ambitious you are and how, I don't know, quick you want to move, right? So I don't think it's a lot different than any of the choices out there for making online revenue, other than it's kind of a warm and fuzzy option that kind of allows you to feel like you're really in like a service or in a relationship, which I think is kind of fun.
Yeah, definitely. And so if somebody has, say, I don't know, say they have like 10, like 5 dedicated students that they know, hey, if I launch a membership of, I don't know, $30 a month, like I know that they're going to sign up, but that's obviously not sustainable income. It's still kind of worth it to go for it, but also understand that like there's going to need to be some hustle to grow type thing.
Yeah, like there will be, right? And I think that's what people realize. But here's the other thing is I see all kinds of people saying, I'm going to create a course, and then the course doesn't sell. And it's like you've gone and created this course that it was a lot of work that you perfected that now nobody is buying, or you don't know how to sell it, or you don't know who to sell it to. So I think that's just the reality of what the business is about. But I think having those 5 people can be really like it can make you feel really good to get that sale and actually work with people. So what I would suggest in that case is that get them to sign up for a long time. Like give them an incentive to sign up and stay signed up and commit to like a year so you can figure some stuff out. And it gives you a runway. It gives you a runway so it doesn't peter out at some point because, oh, I'm busy this month and oh yeah, I'm going away. And then all of a sudden you're down to 1. And that's the hard part. Because I don't think serving like 5 people, even though I know it's not financially sustainable, it still feels like there's some momentum. And I would try to lock them in if you can for a really good deal and a real commitment to helping them, and then go find your people. And that's where I'd get you get bold, you get niched, you put yourself out there. You have to come up with your unique perspective that is interesting to people who are interviewing on podcasts and all these things. And then you can, but you have to be prepared. If you're charging anything for $30 a month, and that's your main source of income, you have to be hustling somehow. I mean, at first, yeah, if it's a volume thing, but then the alternative is that, I don't know, like, is there a way that you could charge those 5 people $300 a month and like with other skills? Like there's this other way of thinking too, which is still a membership. It's just a different kind of model. And we have to consider that because we can't just keep running ourselves into like the ground, not asking for enough, but actually really serving really well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you touching on that. And that definitely makes sense to me. And I think there's just, various things to consider. And I think that if you have, kind of a smaller audience, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I'm assuming that, if you're just doing group classes or even privates, income's going to be a little low to start out with anyways. So you'll be kind of in that hustle mode regardless. It's just a matter of like, how do you want to set up your business in terms of serving people? And one of the things that I really like about a membership, kind of like what you were saying, is like, then you're not just setting up a schedule of classes where you're doing drop-ins and kind of hoping that people show up, hoping that people pay. It's like if people have this unlimited membership, they're more likely to be showing up more. And then I also love the strategy of selling a year. I know this is something that I've seen memberships do, been a part of memberships that way. I know I was a part of Podcasters Paradise for a while when I first started podcasting. And one thing that was cool is like you got a pretty significant discount for signing up for a year. So I know we did that. And then because they were growing so rapidly, you were basically like grandfathered in on the price that you got. So I think the price that I had at the time was like $400 for a year. And we did it for a couple of years and then decided to leave the membership. And I know one of the things they said was like, if you cancel, you're acknowledging that like you don't get this price again. And the cost of the membership is more now.
Yeah. And that is kind of what memberships do. It's like they do reward people for staying long term. And, it's great because I just shouldn't feel like a pressure situation. It should just really feel like the price has authentically gone up because they can afford to up the price because they've proven the value. And like in your case, it sounds like they could have done a course, right, for $500 or maybe whatever. And it sounds like even at a founding member lower price, they still like you got more value and they got more value out of your joining for 2 years. So that's a great amount of time to have somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the value I got out of it was partly the community, which is kind of coming back to what you were talking about with that person that you talked to who was paying, I think you said 2,000 a month in a community of like 900 people. It's like, wow, that seems really overwhelming. But sometimes that can be the type of community that you do want. And I know when I was a part of that community, I honestly used almost none of the resources other than access to this private Facebook community, which was so great for things like, hey, like I've got back 3 designs of my logo. Which one do you guys like? Hey, I'm creating like a subtitle for my podcast. Which one do you guys like? Hey, I'm looking for guests for the show. Which, like, who wants to be a guest? It was just a really good network of people. And that was worth, the cost of it for a while, for us at least. And so,
And that's why people will stay. Like I always say, like they'll come for the original outcome. Like I want, like for example, inside my Profitable Membership Club, people will come because they want to grow their membership, but they'll stay because they're getting support, or they can know that they can show up and ask a question anytime and get an answer, or get put in the right direction, or get validation. So that's why they'll stay when their original outcome is met. Like, oh, okay, I did relaunch, or I did launch for the first time. So yeah, it's definitely, community is a neat aspect. And that's why I was saying at the very beginning, if you're a teacher and you have classes, well, what if you had, I mean, this can be a slippery slope. That's why I really want to think about boundaries. But like, if you were to charge a little bit more, or like double, say, some of these massive brands, and then there was some kind of members only area, or members only Q&A, or something called once a month, even just for people who are isolated because they're not in a studio and they have questions to ask the teacher. And like, imagine adding like a 1 month, like a monthly Q&A. Like I used to show up on those kinds of things when I joined groups all the time. Like if I can ask a question to the mentor about something I've learned, I love that. And it makes a big difference for staying in a program. And like, so for example, I joined one, and actually a couple I joined last year, and they had like these Facebook lives. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to be on a Facebook live. I want to be on a Zoom call where I can ask a question. And so I didn't stay in those communities because of that. But had they had like even in one Q&A that was on Zoom once a month, I would have been there. I probably wouldn't still be in one of them, because that just was the extra special touch that made me feel like, okay, if I get stuck, I can ask a question.
yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious, what are some strategies if somebody's decided, okay, I'm going to do a membership. I know who I want to sell to. I've decided on a price. How do we actually like put this thing out into the world? Because what you were talking about with the whole, like, I've created content and I put all this effort in and then like nobody joins, I feel like it's something, one, that I've totally experienced earlier on in my career, and two, that can be really common and also really discouraging. But I think it comes from people not understanding that, like, hey, you created this thing, now we got to actually market it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on marketing memberships.
Yeah. Okay. So marketing anything, right? So it's I've had like hit and misses a lot too, and it's a lot to figure out. So really, what you're trying to do is warm up your audience, and just share some, like, have them know who you are. Like if they already know you, it can be really a simple personal invite. Like I actually love the idea of, like, when you're launching for the first time, you should be able to know who you're going to ask. Like I had a member of the Profitable Membership Club just launch a few weeks ago, and she was really just like launching to her clients. Like she has a tiny list, but it was mostly the people she'd worked with privately. So she just personally invited all of them. She also did a webinar, and a bunch of them showed up. And then some strangers came as well, like people she didn't know. They must have heard of it somehow, which she posted it in a few places. So it was great. And but then that was her expectations, right? Her expectations weren't to get like tons of people. It was like, I think this person would be a good fit. I think this person. So she sent out like 100 emails. So I think that's actually the way to get started, because you can't just start marketing and think you're going to get sales. So that's the other thing. So then what you start doing is building up your connections to people. I think for marketing, the best way is to get in front of other people's audiences. So like on this podcast right now, and like if there's anyone out there who's interested in this thing, and they've, that's just a way of people knowing that I exist and thinking about, oh, I was looking for help with this. So I think that's really, really key. And I think the other ways are just so expensive and so tedious that unless you already have a big following on some kind of social platform, some people love that. I've never had a lot of traction from that. And that's partly because I don't even want to be on social platforms. Like I haven't even been on it for the last month, like few months. So you kind of have to go with your personality a little bit, but then you've got to be really consistent in one spot. So like I do a podcast I've kind of slowed it down, but then I added it to YouTube. I thought, well, if I'm going to record a podcast solo, I might as well just stick it on YouTube. So like I've done that fairly consistently because I'd prefer long form content. So that is like my channel. And then when people like come across me or Google memberships and find me, they're like, oh, I love your podcast. I just got that the other day from someone. And I think that's just like, okay, now they've gotten to know me and now they're probably on my email list. And that means that when the doors are open or I have something to invite them to, they will get the notice. I will send it out to my list. So you kind of want all your roads to lead to your list eventually. So that's like marketing 101, the version of like, just go out and invite everyone but then make sure you put them on your list if they do join, and then start trying to grow that by getting in front of people who also have like share audiences of similar kinds of people who you want to get in front of.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's all very, very good information. And the last thing I wanted to cover with you is just kind of overcoming it's like the negative self-talk in terms of like just the normal, I think, human things that can come up, like the fear that you're not good enough, or the fear that you're going to create this thing and nobody's going to join. Even if you have, say you're that person who has like 5 dedicated students and it's like realistically, they're going to join. Like they've told you, yet we're humans, right? It's like we still have all these feelings. We feel like nobody's going to join. All those types of feelings. Like how do we kind of overcome that so that we can actually push through and, make this happen?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is that you might not overcome it, but you still do it. So, I mean, I'm constantly like, I'm kind of over it now, but I remember even sticking out Facebook ads like years ago, and like people in my community are going to see them. Like, what are they going to think? Like, I've been years and years and years and years of like being somebody who likes a challenge, but I don't necessarily like a lot of attention. So yeah, I get it, but you kind of have to do it. You have to recognize that nobody's actually really cares. Like they're so inundated with offers and content and with everything. You also can't control how people react and what they think. And you just have to find your source of fulfillment. Like you just have to reflect on those clients who you just had a session with and they were like, wow, that was amazing. I feel so good. And every time you serve somebody, you have to remember that that's exactly what you're trying to do. So that's the only thing that can really shine out from the doubt, because we're meant to doubt as humans. Like we're wired to like check in with others, fit into the tribe so we don't get left out and starve. Like these are wired in us and they're normal. And so they're not going to go away. And I think like, even if you're launching like your $100,000 launch, you're still going, oh, what if it's not good enough? Like I see that's the thing, like that doesn't change. Failure still hurts even when you're successful. So I think we just have to recognize it's part of that cycle and then get into the zone of like that service feeling of like, I'm doing this because it's what I'm meant to do. This is my zone of genius. I know people get value from this. And if no one knows I exist, I can't do this for a living and I can't also help people. And I think you just have to switch the story a little bit on purpose.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I definitely can resonate with the like, the fear, the doubt might not go away, but it's like actually just pushing through and doing the thing, even though that stuff does exist. And I think that that's more realistic and actually more powerful, right? Because that's looking at this natural human experience that we're having, like being scared and feeling uncomfortable with something you've never done before is totally normal. We all experience it, but it's like, can I move through that and come out on the other side and still say like, yes, I'm moving forward with this launch. Like I'm putting this thing out to the world, out to the universe.
You just have to do it. You have to have a date. Like, I don't know, like I was saying to you earlier, I had all this like new kind of whole system I've created and training and everything. And it was like, I get obsessed with like finishing it and getting it out. And I mean, that's kind of part of how I deal with anxieties. I just want to get things done. And it's still like, oh, but what if it flops? Like always think that. And at the very, because I know, because things have flopped. Like, the things that I've done that have been like, I thought the most valuable or the biggest, like, this will be so great, people will love this, have just been like, from a sales perspective, bombed. So it's like, it's almost like you just have to have this real feeling of like humility and being humble and being like, well, nobody really figures this out. This is what everyone is striving for in this world all the time, is like getting ahead and getting it, impressing people and getting rewarded and all that. And it's like, it's not like we're hearing the stories of the success stories. We're not seeing the 99% of the other people who are like, or even the people who are telling you their success story, they're bombing all the time. Like, they're putting out new products, they're putting out new videos, they're doing all kinds of things that are getting like no traction. You're just not hearing that story. You're hearing their one success story over and over and over and over again. So it's not realistic. So we're looking at a picture out there that it's been like touched up, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's always really helpful for me when like really successful entrepreneurs share like, this is my 20th business, or like, this is like the 5th launch I've done. Cause I think that you're right. Like, we really do see kind of that place in time where they've been successful. Yet I think that pretty much everyone who has had some, stroke of success with what they're doing, it wasn't like the first time that they did it, right? It's like everyone starts from the bottom and works their way up and has trial and error and learns from that. And so I always find, like, for me, it's really helpful to see, like Amy Porterfield, for example. It's like she's super successful. She has massive, like 7-figure launches. And that feels so like far away to me, yet to know like where she started, it's like, okay, she started as like a baby entrepreneur, just like me.
But she also had a lot of success. And so she is the challenging example, because her like, oh, I didn't do so great was still like not bad, So I think that's what I'm trying to point out, is that, first of all, she works, okay, like works a lot, and that's her focus and that's her passion, and you can just see it. There's no like, oh, like, I think it's her heart and soul and her life's purpose. And I think that we have to kind of like, say, well, am I like that? Like, do I want to be like that? Do I want to be that focused on like hitting the goals that, and I think that like, I'll question that too and be like, no, it's not really my personality to be a worker bee. Like, I don't want that enough. Like, I don't want that much wealth even, like, or it's just, to me, feels like, so we have to question that a little bit, because yeah, she is a success story, but here's the thing. She's probably had launches like recently in this last couple of years, especially, that have done worse than she expected. So what I'm trying to kind of point out is that someone like her is even going, oh, like, this sucks, and like their heart is sinking, because when you have like a certain level of expectations, which we all have in our lives, no matter where we're at, it's not comparing person to person. It's comparing like us now to us before and us in the future. That's always going to be hard. And that's what I'm saying. Like, as human beings, it doesn't escape anybody. So we just have to recognize that we can't have expectations for ourselves that it's not going to be difficult, because it's difficult for everyone, even when they're doing really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I think it's always like important to consider that from a number of different perspectives, and yeah, not assume anything about anyone's path and journey, and remember that we're all on our own unique path and journey with what we're doing too. So
yeah. And that. Really, like, I think it's just the dismantling of the ego, which,
oh my God.
The challenge with that is that when we take our ego out of our business, then we don't really have the same business drive, right? Because ego is pursuing goals. So it's an interesting combination to think about. So that's why that little edge that we have, we're going to have to just be like, okay, here it is. And this is us getting scared and nervous, but it's also pushing us to go further.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that. And so I'm curious, I guess before I shift into business lessons you've learned, is there anything else kind of with memberships that you want to share kind of before we wrap up this portion of the show?
Oh, I've covered a lot, but maybe the couple of things to think about is just, like I said, that structure, like, what type of membership do you have, and what is the real focus of it? Like, is it community, or is it education, or is it some kind of like coaching or, consulting? And those three types will help you stay a little bit focused on which one is more yours. So you're not tempted to kind of give everything away all the time. You can kind of have a little bit of structure, like, no, this is really about the lessons, or no, this is really about the support behind the scene, like behind, in between classes, or no, this is actually about connecting all the people I know. If you know which one of those you're most passionate about and you think you can serve the best doing, then that will help you kind of like think through how to put it together, what to offer, and what that's worth.
Amazing. Yeah. I definitely feel aligned with that. And so I'm curious if you can share, I mean, you've had a very vast, career with a lot of, I'm sure, ups and downs and amazing successes and that type of thing. Can you share some of the biggest business lessons you've learned throughout your career?
Yeah, well, I think just the niching thing, just the niching thing, testing that out, just testing it, right? Like, you don't have to all of a sudden say, I'm going to do this specific kind of yoga with this specific kind of person. You don't have to say it, but you can test it. That's a great way to do it without switching your entire brand or focus. Is just be like, I'm going to put it like how I did with memberships. Like, I put out an article to a group I was in, and it got a lot of feedback and a lot of interest. And that was my first test, actually. And actually, I think I got a client out of it right away. So that's an interesting, like, everything's testing. There's no right, there's no final, and there's no, like, it's just, you have to test. And you're just looking at it like you're a scientist with a hypothesis, and you're going out there and just testing the hypothesis. So that's one of the things that is important, and experimenting, and also like not changing things up too quickly. So if you had some success in something, like a launch or like some feedback on something you've done, don't go and throw it all away. To like try to like change something, one part of it instead of all of it, so that you can actually truly see, well, what was the part that was really strong and what wasn't as strong. And then I would say the final thing is just, you're never going to be ready, right? Like, I have learned that the hard way too. Like, there's no clear sign for like, oh, you have to do this. I know everyone always says like, you have to be full with one-on-one clients before you can do this kind of model, or you have to like have, people should be asking for something. Well, I've never really seen that. And I haven't seen that for a lot of people. It's not often the case where everyone's asking you to do something, and that's why you decide to do it. Sometimes you just have to hold your own torch and just be like, I really want this, and I'm going to figure it out. And it might take a while, but I'm going to figure it out. So I think that's also just really important to remember as we move forward with being a little more risky and a little bit more entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think that is a good reminder. And those are some really great tips and lessons. So thank you for sharing that, Lisa. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up?
No, I think we're good. Yeah, I mean, I have some training you can check out on my website. So if you do want to come over to scalingdeep.com /freebie, that's where I have a training on a whole bunch of like how to think about your membership and how to go about it. So that's a really great resource for anyone who's interested in thinking about this a little further or already has a membership.
Amazing. I love that. And then is there anywhere else that people can go to find you online, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I do have a Facebook group called Membership Site Mastery with Lisa. And that is the only place I'm kind of showing up these days. I'm on LinkedIn and I am on Instagram, and I might start posting there again, but I haven't for a while. So, but yes, you can always DM me on any of those channels, as well as like a Facebook. I've got a business page, Scaling Deep, but find me in the group. It's better.
Amazing. We'll make sure there's links to all of that in the show notes. And yeah, just want to thank you for your time today. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show. And I'm just so excited with everything you're doing and so grateful for all of the knowledge that you shared with us today.
Thanks, Amanda. That was so fun. It's been great to connect.
Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomeyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.